During this era of Renaissance, we see many countries that begin to explore the world and they begin to move beyond their borders, go out and find out what there is beyond Europe. So it's important to understand as well that we are focusing primarily on Europe during this time. There are other civilizations around the world that are exploring. It is not as if the only countries that were sending out ships across the globe were Spain, Portugal, maybe a little bit of England. There were other countries, especially over in Asia, that were already doing so and were already colonizing. They were already trading. But unfortunately, the people in Europe weren't aware of a whole lot of that because they hadn't left Europe for quite some time. So there were three primary motivations that sent people out to explore, and that is gold, glory, and God. And I'm going to touch on each one of those things here for a moment. The first reason here is related to gold. There's an economic purpose for them to go out and to explore all throughout the world. Many of the products that were brought back to Europe brought wealth to these nations. And so the more exploration they could do, the more that they had the opportunity to build the wealth of their nation, which meant that they could invest into their nation, into their people, into their military, into their navy, whatever it is that they valued, they could then go spend that money on. And for most of the early exploration time period, they were searching for gold. By the 1450s, they began to then focus attention, at least some countries focus their attention on slaves. Slaves from Africa became a valuable commodity that they were able to trade all over the world and earn a whole lot of money off of. We'll talk about the slave trade in another unit. They would also focus on God and the spreading of their religious ideas throughout the world. And so the Roman Catholic Church was definitely focused on expanding, especially when they saw that there were new lands and new territories to be evangelized. And so along with evangelization comes new churches, and with new churches comes more money. And so there was a financial motivation there as well, but also a spiritual one with the Catholic Church. And so many of these exploration ships were sent out with priests on board to be able to find out what the religion or the viewpoint of the natives would be, or the individuals they were coming in contact with. And then they would eventually build a church, set up a colony, and try to evangelize those that were there. Political reasons were important as well. This would be the glory aspect, and there were kings and queens that wanted the notoriety, they wanted the fame, they wanted their name to be on one of these ships, and they wanted it to be in the name of king or queen, fill in the blank. So they were going out for their own glory. They wanted their nation to be known to everybody else around the world as the greatest, because they could explore and they could find all these new territories and new lands around the world. And so they did it for personal reasons. They did it for glory of their country. They did it to make their country stronger. And then lastly here, there were some technological reasons that helped them to be able to accomplish all of this stuff. And these new developments allowed them to be able to explore territories and parts of the globe that they had never been able to before. The compass was an important invention that allowed them to navigate much more efficiently and to make sure that they were not going to get themselves off course. The sextant was a tool that was used to measure the horizon with the angle of the sun and to be able to determine where your location would be. And this provided another resource for sailors to make sure that they did not lose their way as they were navigating new territories, new lands. Keep in mind that GPS does not exist yet, and so you need something to be able to make sure that you can still get back home. The problem with the sextant was that when the sun went down, you lost your navigation. And so the astrolabe was developed to be able to navigate with the stars. And so make sure to keep those two separated, that the sextant was by the sun and the astrolabe was by the stars. Helped sailors navigate and make sure they could get back home and they knew where they were going. We also have the invention of the caravel. Caravel was a ship that had many sails. I know it's kind of covered up on my images there on the screen, but you can see a little bit of it back in the background. So all of these sails allowed for the caravel to be able to sail much more effectively through both ocean waters and river waters. It was able to sail very quickly, but also be able to withstand the massive waves in the ocean. And so it was able to go into narrower areas where some of the larger seaworthy ships were not able to go. So the caravel provided a lot more ability to be able to sail than what some of the previous ships had been able to do. As a result of exploration, we see new agriculture that is traded back and forth between Europe and other parts of the world. Europe is introduced to things like potatoes and corn that they had not previously had. There's also increased wealth for many of these nations that invest in exploration. They are able to bring back a lot of things to Europe to increase their wealth, and they bring back desirable products. And so they're able to do really well with that. There's an expansion of slavery. Of course, this is not a good result of exploration, but it is one that is worth discussing, because you can see there on this map, many of these trading routes are going to go right across Africa, right next to Africa. Slave trade was already happening in Africa among different slave tribes. It often looked different than what Europeans transformed it to be, but they did pick up slaves along the way. They took them to the new plantations, and they ended up implementing those slaves into laborers. Many cultures changed as a result of exploration. Not only the cultures that the Europeans encountered, but also European culture was changed as well with the things and ideas and new products that they brought back, and the wealth that they accumulated, as well as the greed to go out and to get more and to continue to gain more glory for their country. And the tensions grew between European nations as they competed for similar territories and competed for new land. Their tensions would build as they had conflict and interaction out on the open seas. It would often trickle down into politics and things at home. One of the most prominent examples of exploration is my friend and yours, Christopher Columbus. And I think it's important to know a little bit about his story so that we understand what he did and why he is so famous. So Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, and during his early years, his father was a wool trader, and he did not like the wool business, and so he wanted the adventure of the open seas. He decides to leave his home in Genoa at the age of 14. He goes to Portugal. In Portugal, he becomes a map maker, and he learns how to navigate. He learns how to draw maps and do them accurately, and then he decides to join the Portuguese Navy. Therefore, he can be trained and he can learn how to control one of these ships and how all the responsibilities and roles on the open sea. So once he learned how to sail, he developed a plan looking at his maps and looking at and doing some figures. He thought that there must be a faster way to get to Asia. So he planned that a way that he could sail to the west in order to get to China. He went to the King of Portugal, and the King of Portugal laughed at him and didn't think that he had any potential. He didn't think there was any way that that could happen. He didn't believe it was possible. Of course, many during this time, contrary to popular belief, many did believe that the earth was round. They just thought that it was not going to be any quicker to go to the west in order to get to China. And most of the kings at this time were not willing to lose their investment of their ships or their sailors in order to experiment with this. And so Christopher Columbus, he needed somebody to give him a hand. He was turned down by the King of Portugal, and so he decides to go to the arch rival. Portugal and Spain share a border, but they were bitter rivals out in the open sea. They did not get along very well, and they're both competing for similar territories, wealth, and for power. And so he decides, if Portugal won't help me out, I will go to Spain. He goes to Queen Isabella, and Queen Isabella says, I don't have enough faith in you to give you everything you need, but I'll give you some 3 broken down ships that if you can repair them and get them ready to go, then you can have them. And so that's exactly what he does. He sets out on voyage number 1 in 1492. On this voyage, he had 3 ships and 88 men. And they get to October, and the captains ask Columbus to turn back home. They are losing faith in their captain, and they're believing that they're about ready to lose everything. They're never going to make it back home. So he says, give me 3 days. On October 12th, 3 days later, land is sighted. And so they land in the Bahamas, specifically on San Salvador, October 12th, 1492. That is a date that you do need to know. Make sure to mark that. So they get to San Salvador, and they begin to explore a little bit there. They find Cuba. This is the very first time that the Europeans are introduced to tobacco. And they begin to try to set up a settlement in Haiti. They leave a few men behind. They leave them with some supplies, and they make a plan to go back to Spain, and then they're going to return and to see how they're doing. They try to take 12 natives back with them, but unfortunately, all 12 of those natives die en route back to Spain. So he comes back to Spain and tells everybody what he had found. He embellished his story a little bit, leading them to believe that he had found traces of gold and that he needed to return in order to find the source. And so he gets exploration number 2. In exploration number 2, Queen Isabella issues him 17 bright, shiny, brand new ships. Now, they might not have been quite that new, but they were much better than the first original 3. And I should have mentioned that the first 3 were the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. And so now he has 17 ships added to, in voyage number 2. He has over 1,200 men, including sheep, priests, and cows that are sent to help set up this new colony that is supposed to be starting here in Cuba. So in this journey, he is going to explore Cuba a little bit more, as well as its surrounding islands. He is ultimately looking for China and also looking for gold. There are a number of problems in Haiti. Many of the settlers were killed, and so Columbus tries to resupply the settlement, but the problems continue, and there's a lot of greed going on, conflict with the natives there as well. And so at the end of voyage number 2, he returns home to Spain, having found 0 gold, but he does take back some of the natives, this time successfully. Voyage number 3 happens in 1498, and the focus here is exploring the coastline of South America. Again, he's trying to find that water route over to Asia, believing it's just on the other side of these islands or this land that he has discovered. He is trying to find that water route through there. During journey number 3, he goes back to Haiti. There are a lot more problems there, and the Spanish government sends other individuals to come search out to try to figure out what the problem is. They accuse Columbus of being the source of that problem. They believe that he is stirring up issues in Haiti, and so they arrest him, take him back for trial, and he is accused of stirring up problems in Haiti and is jailed for the next 3 years, and he loses a lot of the faith of the people of Spain. He gets out of jail, and he goes on his final exploration. This is journey number 4. During this one, he only is allowed to take 4 ships and only 120 men. His focus here is on Central America and Jamaica. Most of his ships were in very poor condition. By the time they get to Jamaica, the ships have rotted out with worms, and he is stranded for almost 1.5 years without anywhere to go and nobody to rescue him. So he and the few men that he has make canoes. They paddle their 450 miles to Haiti to try to get help and to get rescued, and they do. They are rescued. They return back home, really with nothing to be gained as a result of this journey. So in 1506, Columbus dies. Some have speculated that he died of depression because of the fact that he never reached his goals and never seemed to find success, and perhaps even a broken heart because of the fact that he never accomplished all of his goals. I think it's also important to discuss Ferdinand Magellan at this point. So Magellan hears of Columbus's journeys, and he decides that he is going to try to make his way all around the globe, specifically trying to find that water route to China that had eluded Christopher Columbus. And so his goal was to get to Indonesia, the Spice Islands. And so he sets out on his voyage here in September of 1519. He believed that there was a secret passageway through South America called the Rio de la Plata. So that's really what he was searching for. He was trying to find that shortcut so that he didn't have to go all the way down through to the southern tip of South America, but Of course, he's never going to find it because there is none. So, in April of 1520, there are a couple of captains who are attempting to mutiny, and so Magellan has none of that. He captures them and he has them quartered and thrown overboard, and therefore the remainder of the trip there's no more mutiny, there's no more threat of mutiny, and Magellan has the loyalty of his men. By the time we get to October of 1520, they find the Strait of Magellan at the southern tip of South America. Keep in mind at this point that Magellan calculated it would take him about a year and a half to make this journey, and so they took supplies for 2 years. And so we began in September 1519. Here we are in October of 1520, already a year into it, and just now getting to the southern tip of South America. So from November to March of 1521, they're then going to cross over the Pacific Ocean. This journey is a whole lot further than what they had thought. During this time, they run out of supplies, they run out of food, they even have to go as far as gathering the leather products, soaking them in salt water, and getting them softened up, and then they boil them to try to make a soupy mush. Of course, that's not going to provide a whole lot of nutrients, but it seems to do the job okay, except for the 19 men that die of malnutrition along this route. They finally make it to Guam in March of 1521, which is the first sign of land that they had seen in a long time. They get to the Philippines in April of 1521, and in April here, they have a battle with the natives. They're not welcomed in the Philippines, and it's during this skirmish with the natives that Magellan is killed. Well, his men have a decision to make. Do they continue on? Do they stop the journey? What do they do? And so they decide to press on in honor of their captain. They get to Indonesia in November of 1521, and they finally reach those Spice Islands that he had tried to get to. Most of the ships are unseaworthy at this point. The ones that are still remaining, only one ship is still able to continue from this point. But they do go on as much as they can. They get to Spain in September 1522, becoming the first group of people to circumnavigate the globe. Now, they loved Magellan so much that they wanted him to get the credit, and so the only person who is given that credit is the captain, Ferdinand Magellan. However, he technically did not make it all the way around the globe.